Think you know the story of Henry VIII? A king, 6 wives, a break with the papacy, clean, tidy, classroom ready. Forget that glossy, simplified version straight out of school textbooks and TV docudramas. The real story is not a political white paper. It reads like a medical chart, cross-filed with a police report, a dossier thick with symptoms and sworn statements. Reality was dirtier, more tangled, and far more frightening. We're talking about a man whose own body became both prison and punishment, shackles for himself and an instrument of torture for everyone forced to breathe the same air. A ruler whose reek of decay drifted through galleries and great halls, and a monarch whose coffin, so the tale goes, couldn't contain the gases of his own rot. Prepare to understand why his court functioned like a pressure chamber where fear was thicker than the air, and why the king's favor, heavy, sudden, and changeable, was more dangerous, more lethal than his anger. To understand the monster, you first have to see the man, young, vivid, and dazzling to his century. In youth, Henry looked like the Renaissance carved in flesh, nearly 6'3", athletic and broad-shouldered, fair-skinned and red-haired. He was Europe's golden showpiece. Foreign envoys wrote breathless dispatches about his beauty, his bearing, and his repertoire of talents. He shot a bow like a champion, broke lances in tournament lists, hunted with relentless stamina, and played real tennis with timing and touch. He spoke multiple languages, wrote poetry and music, patronized scholars and artisans, and loved argument for sport. He was not just the heir apparent, he was the golden boy who seemed capable of everything at once, yet all gilding thins. The luster cracked. Beneath the bright veneer, the flesh began to fail. The mask slipped, and underneath it lay pain, infection, and the slow, public unmaking of the body. By the end, Henry was the grotesque negation of his younger self. His weight climbed past 400 pounds, his waist swelled to 54 inches. You can read those numbers directly off the suits of armor that still stand in the tower. Raising him into a saddle required tackle and hoists, functional cranes, plus attendants trained not just in ceremony but in mechanical lift. The worst, however, lived under velvet and brocade. His legs harbored chronic suppurating ulcers, likely varicose in origin, open, wet, and inflamed, weeping pus and ichor day after day. Physicians of the day, lacking anything curative, resorted to cautery with hot irons into thick, pungent salves, resins, vinegars, heavy metals. The pain was infernal, the relief was minimal, the smell was unforgettable. Courtiers pressed perfumed kerchiefs to their faces, angled their bodies toward windows, and learned to keep breathing shallow. People said you could smell his approach before the footfalls. First, the medicinal sweetness, then the sourness of rot, and finally the shadow of the king in the doorway. Body and policy blurred. That physical decay seeped into temperament, into judgment, into punishments and pardons alike. How did the athlete become a ruin? Many historians point to the 1536 joust, a hinge of a day. It wasn't a random fall. In heavy armor, thrown from a heavy horse and pinned beneath it, Henry lay unconscious for something like 2 hours, by 16th century understanding, skirting the edge of clinical death. From that day forward, the graph tilts down. The old ulcers reignited with savage persistence. Steps shortened, gait stiffened, pain became the baseline. Worse was the shift in mind. The quick-tempered prince who could show mercy hardened into a suspicious, retaliatory sovereign, prone to detonations of rage and long, vindictive memory. Flesh and spirit frayed together. The private agony spilled outward, onto wives, ministers, courtiers, and ultimately, a nation. His wives felt the break first and most. Their saga is not a chain of romances, but a record of systematic terror with execution as the full stop. Anne Boleyn's story is the demonstration. Accused of adultery, incest, witchcraft, charges staged with theatrical precision, she watched a ring of men, including her brother, condemned and destroyed to frame the narrative around her. As a chilling act of mercy, Henry brought in a French swordsman for a swift, clean beheading. Punishment, yes, but also performance, an object lesson for every eye at court. For young Catherine Howard, wife number 5, he went further, rewriting statute to criminalize concealing a non-chaste past before marrying the king, warping national law to punish a single girl for what she had been. Life beside Henry swung between glitter and dread. One day silks and smiles, the next day shudders, questions, and a guarded door. He engineered the pressure, pure psychological violence, and it reached as far as the table, the bedroom, the chapel, the hallway. Henry didn't merely overeat, he devoured, as if consumption itself could smother pain or drown out the static of paranoia. A daily intake around 5,000 calories, enough for a small village, was not unusual. The platters carried roasted swans and refeathered peacocks, whole suckling pigs lacquered to a glaze, hills of venison and beef, and gallons of wine and ale decanted like clockwork. He believed foods conferred power, venison for the hunter's edge, oysters for virility. Even when walking any distance felt like a siege. Every dish passed through layers of tasters who feared poison, feared error, and feared the king's mood most of all. Meals lengthened into pageants, a decaying monarch consuming the very bounty that was destroying him, his court watching, smiling, applauding on cue. And that appetite was only one facet of a larger derangement, a hungry, grinding need to control the body by feeding it. The madness radiated outward. Paranoia rewired the palace. The court became a maze of whispers, informers, and paid ears. The walls hid listening slits and hidden passages. The floors creaked with footsteps trained to stop mid-stride. He slept with a loaded crossbow by the bed. Ritual, habit, talisman. No one felt safe. A stray phrase, a lifted brow, an unlucky rumor could bend your path toward the tower. Under Henry, the Treasons Act expanded so far that predicting the king's death, words alone, could cost one's life. He punished people for what he believed they might do, thought as crime, forecast as felony. Fear proved contagious. Nobles plotted against nobles, servants betrayed masters, friends rehearsed their denials. Even Thomas Cromwell, architect of the English Reformation, fell to a sudden gust of royal will. Yesterday indispensable, today disposable. Protection was an illusion, proximity was a hazard, and when the king died, the theater didn't end. It survived as legend, in chronicles, in the public pulse. His end matched the tone of his rule, swollen, foul, unsettling. His body expanded past the limits of ceremony. When the coffin traveled to burial, it reportedly burst under the pressure of trapped gases. The story persists because it feels true to the larger truth. Decaying flesh seeped out. Dogs, in one version of the tale, came to lick what remained of a man who called himself God's deputy on earth. The ruler who held a nation in terror died at last as a victim of his own body and appetites, leaving behind not order and peace, but a residue of chaos and dread. He was laid to rest beside Jane Seymour, the only wife who gave him a male heir, perhaps the one sincere gesture in a reign that rarely rewarded sincerity. So the next time a polished portrait of a mighty king catches the light, look past the jewel-set chains and smooth, oiled beard. Remember that power's facade often masks rot, that splendor can be a cover for ruin. Henry's legacy is not only reform and 6 names recited like a rhyme. It is a hard warning about what limitless power can do to a man and what a man so armed can do to everyone else. If you want more of the truths they don't include in textbooks or tourist guides, subscribe and stay close. History is crowded with monsters and crowns, and their long, heavy shadows still touch our lives.